about what we ought to be doing now in the struggle. Are we wasting too much time? Shouldn't we have already taken up arms? Why we continue to issue resolutions and all the rest of it? We've had that kind of criticism several times before. And each time we've had only one answer. Namely that a struggle of this kind necessarily comprises stages. And the tactics you use in one stage may not necessarily be the same that you use in a subsequent stage. And it would be futile to jump stages because we want to give the impression that we are in a hurry. Most of what I've heard this evening coming from the Cameroonian community in the USA confirms one thing that we noticed at the beginning back in Cameroon, namely that you find yourself having to persuade a people who are in trouble and who are in need of redemption that they are in trouble. You can imagine for yourself that it will be quite a while before you persuade them to join in the search for a solution out of the trouble. And the hard reality of our struggle is that in the initial stage, we have had to persuade Southern Cameroonians that there was a Southern Cameroonian question, paradoxical as though that they sound. Those are not the people who you throw into the marquee and get them to shoot guns at each other or at anybody else. We are trying to persuade Southern Cameroonians that it is not enough to pass resolutions. Yes, but if you are going to do more than pass resolutions, then you do need a certain minimum amount of financial resources. I don't know how many of you can imagine the difficulty that attaches to having to fight a national cause from the pockets of a few individuals who have to bear the burden because they had the misfortune of finding themselves there when it started. One thing is clear, that those who started it were not born to start it. They happen to have been there when the need arose to start. It was them, it could have been you. And for us to leave the burden to them because they were there to start it is one way of saying that we might as well not even have started a cause at all. Today, everybody believes that there is a problem. It has taken 2 years of sensitization to do that, not only nationally, but internationally. And anyone who follows world affairs cannot minimize, especially at the present time, the impact of international pressure. I say especially at the present time because, as Mr. Eric Chinde pointed out, we know in what state our nation is economically. We know in what state the regime against which we are fighting is. We know in what stage the Cameroon people are right now. And there is a limit to what even a fool can do in resisting international opinion and pressure in such circumstances. And I think it would be regrettable to minimize the impact of the international community at this time, including, of course, the United Nations. Listening to you, one is at least comforted that there is no need to preach anymore. There are so many preachers amongst you already that all what was required was to give them a congregation. And it seems to me that starting from this afternoon or this evening, you are in the process of giving the preachers amongst you, the Southern Cameroonian preachers amongst you, a suitable congregation. The message I have conveyed will pass. It will get through. And we are not expecting results as quickly as others might be expecting from us, perhaps because in the past 2 years we have had the experience of what it takes to be pioneers. And it therefore wouldn't be easy for those who initiated this to wrought a miracle and overnight produce results. Nevertheless, they can be sure that by their sheer persistence, conditioned by their own conviction about the rightness and the justice of this cause, within the Cameroon community in the United States, the response is bound to be bountiful in the next few weeks or months. What we have seen gives us enough reason to believe that this will be so. Again, everything has been said, but let me, especially since there was no indication as to what topics we're supposed to talk about, which was a good thing because the more spontaneous the better. But let me stress one or two things. The first has to do with this attitude of Cameroonians who may feel that they have managed to run away from it. The first thing is that even with the situation where the U.S. Embassy is increasingly scrutinizing harder applications for visas to leave the Cameroon for the U.S., I can assure you that if every one of us was inclined to leave Cameroon today, we could find a way to leave. And if we find a way to leave, it may well be that the first place we head towards is the United States of America. So, give us the challenge, and we will all leave and join you here. And yet I'm sure that is not a challenge you want to give us. But even if you did, be sure that we will not pick up that challenge. Because for some of us, it does not make sense to abandon your own country at the time when it appears to need you most in order to go and enjoy in a land which at first was no more privileged than yours, but it was built thanks to the labor, commitment, perseverance, endurance of those who were pioneers in this land. It is time that in the context of today, we made ourselves pioneers of the Southern Cameroon that we want to build, and if others are willing, of the Cameroon that we want to build, giving Southern Cameroon its rightful place within that new Cameroon. In any event, how can you, however comfortable you may feel here, how can you possibly fail to think about Cameroon? Well, as we all know, part of the consideration that you are given in this society, and I have no intention to deprecate any one of you. I know your achievements in various domains. But I think some of us also have lived sufficiently long in the Western world to know that we skilled as you may be at your place of work, where you are this great engineer, the great pilot, the great pharmacist, the great whatever else, from the moment you leave your place of work where you excel and step into the street where you meet with everybody else, you are not much more different from certain other people who you otherwise would think would never get near you. And the consideration that you get when you step into the street is conditioned by a general perception of your type in your society. And that general perception of your type in your society in America is conditioned by America's perception of Africa from which you originate. You cannot, therefore, whether you like it or not, you cannot disentangle your being in the United States from your origins in Africa, and particularly in Cameroon. You can try as hard as you may, it will not work. But what is more is that whereas you are able to escape and to come here, I wonder what kind of milieu you want to deliver your children into and bring them up. In this place? As a matter of choice, yes. But if you're going to bring them up here for the simple reason that you cannot afford to go back to your own country, I wouldn't expect you to be satisfied with that. And if you are satisfied with that, I would say that there's something seriously wrong with you. And how are we supposed to be different, even the successful ones amongst us? How are we supposed to be different from the Jews, for example? In the U.S. where you are we the ones to draw your attention to the fact that the Jews pull the weight that they pull in this country? That they are as successful as they are in this country? That they determine things in this country the way they do? But where would Israel be without the Jewish lobby in the United States, in France, in Belgium, and all other places? How can you, on the grounds that you are satisfied with your personal condition, forget your own Israel that the Southern Cameroon happens to be for you? That is a question I'd like to leave with you. We do need your support. And when I say we, I mean the people of Southern Cameroon do need your support. It wouldn't come from everybody. We don't have the illusion that it will come from everybody. But part of this exercise is to ensure that those amongst you who know that they can do something, at least are brought into communion with others, and together you can determine what you bring, how you bring it, and where you send it. And I'm sure that the ranks of those who can do it will grow more and more. So, previous speakers have said what kind of form, what form that contribution can take. I don't want to go to that. But the other little point I want to dwell on, I say little, but its consequences for our cause are heavy. I don't believe in illusion. I don't believe in denying that a problem exists. However difficult it may be, I may not be able to solve it, but I have to admit first that it exists in order to be able to address it, and to admit later on that I can't solve it. And so, we cannot deny the existence of the so-called Northwest-Southwest dichotomy. We have to face that and face it squarely. But interestingly, we ask ourselves whether it is sufficiently great to blind us against what evidently is a greater problem. Supposing that in 1961, Southern Cameroon became independent and was not forced to join anyone else, as it could have been. And that it became independent as the unitary state that it was between 1954 and 1972. The Southern Cameroon was governed as one unit. But if in the evolution of the previous 34 years, we came to the point in 1995 where we thought that to keep Southern Cameroon one, you would need a two-state federation, one made up of what is to be called the Bamenda province, and the other made up of what used to be called the Cameroon province, corresponding roughly to today's northwest and southwest. Would you deny the call to make of that unitary state a federation in order to preserve it? And if you made it a federation, would you have to split it? If you made it a federation and it was attacked by Nigeria to its left or that grew to its right, would you try to defend it as one integral unit? In other words, what is incompatible in keeping Southern Cameroons together, even if it means that in response to the specificities of each of its components, you have an arrangement where each of those components takes care of its affairs. And this is within the framework of the draft constitution of the Southern Cameroon People's Conference. which some describe as a federation within a federation. It's meant to solve basic problems. But what is more is that when you analyze it all, there isn't any single tribe or division in the Southern Cameroon and Northwest or Southwest which can ever enjoy autonomy, which can ever claim to be shielded from what Liberia has been doing to our nation for the past 34 years, which can pretend to be better treated by the version of Liberia than any other. In other words, we do have a common oppressor. We have a common master. We must liberate ourselves from that common master. And what we do after we liberate ourselves from the common master to sort out our own internal problems is a matter for ourselves. And it's unbelievable that anyone can stand up there and argue that because there is the likelihood of internal differences, real or potential, that is enough to blind us against the existence of a bigger problem that is facing all of us. But these prejudices are embedded very deep. We shall not deal with them by just brushing them aside. This is a dangerous phenomenon where, for you who are out there, you stress the tribal thing even more, as Dr. Adam said, you stress it even more than we do back home. That's a phenomenon which we are unable to understand. But even though that is the background here, you will need, and my appeal is that, my appeal to people of goodwill amongst you who include Northwesterners and Southwesterners, is that you start amongst yourselves, don't pretend that this phenomenon does not exist, admit that it exists, but bring yourselves together to see how you can resolve it. I say this because, let's not pretend. That phenomenon has been acting as a kind of force of inertia in what you try to do in this community. So, you've only just started. This is your first conference. We hope that you have many more, and that in each of the conferences you should have the courage to tackle these issues. And if in tackling them you feel that you need to be in touch with us back in Cameroon to make whatever contribution we can, we will be prepared to do so. As I said, the speakers have been put down without any specific indication of what they're supposed to be saying. Since the idea was to give us a chance to talk rather than listen, I think talking for 5 seconds as I've done is long enough. And I would ask that you permit me to sit down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Monzo. I see he was just on point 3 of his notes. I would like to thank Dr. Simon Monzo for raising this issue of division of labor. There is a mental, there is a manual, and there is a financial. I think it's for each and every one of us in this hall to begin to decide on where to place him or herself on the balance, on each and every one of these balances. There are several balances involved, and which takes me right back to the point that I made earlier on, that it's a multifaceted struggle. That having been said, I realize that on the conference program for tonight, I don't know whether it's by coincidence or contrivance, the organizers decided to have 2 learned gentlemen talk, as well as 2 ambassadors. So we would move on to Justice Mbu, who would talk after, who should talk now. The legal counselor to the SCPC, one of the legal counselors to the SCPC.
Excellencies, Dr. Foncha, the Honorable Chairman of the CPC, members of the delegation, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy particularly to be present in a powerful delegation of this time. And the reason is simple. There must be somebody who starts a course, and it must be right. And once he maintains that it is right, and I'm sure it's a majority of at least one person, this is to take away the illusion that might is right. Just to say, as Mr. Monono said, the foundation of the law is not the law itself. Because what we have discovered in the union between Southern Cameroons and others is they took errors or precipitation, was the case first, to think that we must come second, or treated second, or cheated, or in some other way treat you as a land. This is point of disagreement. And I think that is what I'd like to explain to you. The union between the two people can be attacked from several fronts. And that is why a man like me who hates injustice necessarily have to abandon whatever type of work I do there and maintain that justice is supreme. I can't cover my conscience for injustice ever. So I assumed in this panel, and I want to say that I'm still working for the government, and I don't care whether tomorrow I'm not there anymore. When you see these our fathers and grandfathers, by 1960 they were negotiating with the United Nations, trying to find ways in that period, whether or not they can stay on their own, and as they refuse them to stay on their own, whether or not they can stay with one partner rather than the other. The old story is too old to be retold. I'm sure that many of you are already conversant with it, and to repeat it all over is to bore you with a story you already know very well. At the end of the day, the promises which they made in the United Nations, which Ajo made, and in fact I want to say that if you have had an opportunity to look at the two alternatives, look at it carefully, you will realize that Nigeria offered us very decent conditions. But we rejected all those conditions. Our fathers were prompted at that time to reject those conditions. Why? Because of affinity. They say this is your brother, you rather try to stay close to him than a friend whose habits you are not very sure. And the promise that kept them close to that big was when they said, look, the whole idea is independence before unification. And even after unification is on the basis of equality. And Ajo went on to say, I will never bring my population to bear on you. I will never annex you. I will never integrate you. I think your brother makes such promises following a customary Anglo-Saxon way. You know his word is law. You will believe him. And you trust that he will respect those words. Especially when he speaks it in the world community. Very important personalities in the world are listening to what you say. They will not think that when the moment arrives, they will drive it under the table and act as he likes. And I think these are very powerful words that a man with an open mind, a Christian-minded person, who has the love of his neighbor and his brothers as himself, would believe it and take them into consideration. And this is what led us to the association. The relationship was not hampered by any other motives. I must tell you frankly that I've made all types of investigations. There was no symbolic inducement given. So it was mere words of cajole, niceties, trust, confidence, which if a man says to a woman, I love you, you don't know that halfway he will abandon you to the child in his stomach. And I think this is what was happening to us. I want also to say You know, Southern Cameroon was a trust territory. The masters who were in charge of the trust were the United Nations and the Great Britain administrators. Just like if somebody dies and says, you take care of my 2 children, and leaves his bank account, the man who only leaves the bank account says, take care of my children. You would expect that he would obey all the instructions the man left as to the use of that money concerning his children. If one of them suddenly eats more of the cake or puff-puffs or plantains and grows fatter and bigger and says, well, I want to marry, so I want to stay on my own, what you will not do is to carry your share, the share of the other one who has not married, to hand over to him and say, look, I terminate the whole arrangement. When your mother wants his own share, give it to him. The natural tendency, you will chop it with his wife together, and the other child will have nothing. If you do that, we say that trustee has abused the trust. He is in breach of the trust. And you must go to him to claim your own share of the money he has given to your brother, because he has not administered according to the trust agreement. This is why we have persuaded all legal arguments that the United Nations is answerable in this situation. I want also to say that, having said that Ahijo made those promises, if you make a decent promise and you fail to keep it, in the lawyer's language, you say you are breach of contract, or the contract has been appreciated. If it's a fundamental breach, because like the one you say, I will never annex you, we will be independent before we enter into the agreement, and then you proceed to do the type of things that happen subsequently. Those things were so fundamental that if you go now to annex, say there's a fundamental breach, so the contract must come to an end. And this is what we are saying. If Ahijo was alive, and whether he's alive or not, Bia is responsible, is his successor. That contract between us, the Southern Cameroonians, and them, Arab people, cannot stand, because there's a fundamental breach in all that they have done. Now, how do you look at the entire arrangement? How did it enter into it? We said we'll go to Foncha after the plebiscite, we'll go to Foncha and then the constitution. Everybody went to Foncha. The Foncha conference room, the period 17th of July to the 1st of July. You can count it, about 4 days were made there, work was done. There was a draft agreement. Fortunately for us, and this is very, very important, I think it must be a divine conspiracy that God came into it. Because Dr. Foncha insisted that, look, this is an arrangement for 2 cultures. For my own culture, the English culture, I will not let go our educational system, nor will I let go the legal system. On that score, Ahijo said, say that the articles are not ready, let's adjourn for 30 days. I think it's a normal type of thing to do. 30 days we meet in Yaoundé. On the 30th day, the conference will never call in Yaoundé. And ever since then, until he died, he never called that constitutional conference. I think that one is a terrible thing, and it's a hard fraud. It deceived everybody to believe what he doing. All he did, therefore, is to change the position of things. You're coming on the 30th day, you don't come. Abolish all political parties in Southern Cameroon. Abolish associations in Southern Cameroon. Make one party. Then when it goes even for election, with Dr. Foncha as vice president, they won the election. By 1972 years, he sacked him. 1972, it threw away the constitution which he himself had signed and introduced a new constitution. The House of Assembly, he abolished it. The House of Chiefs, he abolished it. None of the constitutions ever went into the House of Assembly of Chiefs. He was making his own rules as he liked. And we said nobody can live in that type of goodness, state of affairs, and govern in a country or a community which is governed by law. Even by international law, that is unacceptable. Because when the United Nations came to create trusts, the trusts were created so that human consciousness may grow, so that we may also develop, so that we may also help ourselves, so that human rights can be protected. the young lady who spoke talked about the quality of protection. And that is the basis on which all people are made. And it was to be a democratic process. But you can see the way he was doing and going. He built a dictator until by 1984 now is absolute. They are just said, no more united. And I go back to that upgrade, whatever that means to them. We don't know. So I thought you can also attack the union on that score. Because he has not obeyed any international law, nor obeyed any domestic law. He's asking on his own, and nations must live by law. Even in your own house, husband and wife, there's a common law that joins you together. There must be some agreement, some paper signed. This is how your marriage will be arranged. This is how your property will be done. Will you keep your own salary in your pocket? Or you will join it in a joint bank account and so on. Those type of arrangements are usually made. You cannot live like that. And the UAB went forward. When they made the federal system, they didn't say so much power goes to the federal system. But most of the powers were concentrated to the states. They found out that to succeed the states, which he didn't have power, was too difficult for him. Especially we had Article 47, which said that matters which don't concern individual states, the majority members in parliament of that state must vote before you can pass, at least the quarters. And he knew that things which don't concern Southern Cameroon were difficult to pass. So it was easy for him to dismantle that type of thing. I want therefore to say that in lawmaking, especially international law, there's a rule which we call use cogens. By use cogens, you cannot change the character of the main law of the country just at random. If it doesn't resemble the character of the new one you are creating. If it was a federal character, you cannot suddenly abolish it and turn it into a unitary state when the people themselves are not consented. And in the 1972 referendum, which many of you probably didn't know, what shocked me most in my research when I went to the Goya archives is that the papers they put there was we or yes. We or yes means what? And at the end of the day, it came with 99.8%. That is the terrible. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not a matter to engage. But I want to say that anybody who goes through this type of process, you will claim that, look, I cannot postpone the battleground today because I have passed at least 4. For my children who are still 2 years old, I'd rather die, let them survive, than they should die. Why should I postpone the battle to correct the issue now and wait until tomorrow? We are here, some people will say, but you have lived 34 years. You have years under these conditions, or you've benefited for some of them. Why do you not come to complain so late? I said, no, I'm not late. For instance, the fraud I told you, if I defrauded you today, and only your grandchildren came to discover about the fraud, the court will never say I've never frauded, they will convict you. Because fraud has no limitation time. If I have broken the trust property which is left and done the wrong thing, you have to pay it back. There's no limitation time. If you have broken the rule of use coverage, which I'm trying to explain to you about constitutional law, the international court says you cannot do that. You must go back to the status quo. So we have so many reasons to buttress our cause that we don't even need to ask what will we negotiate. It's so bright and obvious that where there is a right, you must pay back. That's where justice lies. And if you cannot fight for justice, you're wasting your time on them. You may as well take the road and go up. Because to sustain and keep injustice is like staying together with the devil. I want therefore to say that the war which you have to fight is not a war whereby you carry weapons to go about it. It's a war of self-determination. You must be a people of yourself, make your own rules, obey them, and respect the way you live. Develop yourself, develop your children, develop the community in which you live. Nobody should come and tell you how your freedom can be maintained. You don't have to say, every time I'm driving from Imbe to Goya, I necessarily have to encounter 6 checkpoints on the road. You open my book to find out what is in the car, when I pass through that road twice a day. Go to work and go and come back. That is embarrassing. And if you are a taxi, 500 pounds would allow you even arms on in your boot to get to Buya. Nobody would even open it because they wouldn't set you anymore.